The Magicians Podcast is brought to you in proud association with the Magic Circle, Alakazam Magic, and Gigio.
Did that sort of knock your confidence at all or anything?
Terrible. It was a terrible, terrible time.
Yeah. Hey, yo, it's my life, my time, my rights, my rhymes, my grind, my struggle, hustle, sweat in my blood too. I'm ready to smell fear, I smell a lot. My competitors flex here, cause they smelled I was hot. I want it all, excess, the sex, much success, stress us. I want it all, no less, so come on.
Alright, welcome to the show everybody, I hope you are well. This is the Magicians Podcast, which you are listening to. My name is Richard Young, I am your host, and this is the Max Somerset episode. A man who, around a decade or so ago, was doing more magic on television in this country than anyone else. He's going to tell us that story today. In addition to the story of his television work, he's also going to talk to us about his quite unusual upbringing. He's got a really interesting story about where he's from and... well, I won't ruin it, but you're in for a real treat today. Let's do the housekeeping, the social media, Twitter, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. Come on, you know it now. Surely you know it. But you're still not following us. Why is that? I don't understand it. Please do it today. Make a point. If you tune into these podcasts and you're not connected with us on social media, then you're really only getting half of the experience. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Do it today. Make a point. Connect with us. I will notice. I will really appreciate it. And you will be getting the complete Magicians Podcast experience. Impossible is about to open in the West End of London. Make sure you go and catch it this summer. And our show, Champions of Magic, will be in London as part of the Just for Laughs Festival from the 17th of July to the 24th. Go to championsofmagic.co.uk right now if you're interested in buying tickets for it. It would be great to meet some podcast listeners at the show. So if you're in London between the 17th of July and the 24th of July, please do bear it in mind. Okay, my friends, it's time for you to sit back, relax, and enjoy an hour in the company of myself and Max Somerset. So the great thing about doing these podcasts is I'm naturally quite a nosy person, which I think is why I make them. And there's nothing more thrilling than getting a tour of a magician's house, which is what I've just had. It's a bit like Through the Keyhole sometimes. And Max Somerset, who is sat with me now. How are you, Max?
I'm very well, thank you very much indeed, Doctor.
Just give me a tour of a beautiful house which he lives in here in London, and I've had the story of how this house came together, and we're going to hopefully this afternoon find out about how you got to where you are today. And also, Max, today we're going to talk a bit about the future. I think you've got some interesting viewpoints on what you think the future of magic is as well. So, but I think we need to start right at the beginning, which I don't always do, but I think today we do need the whole story. You're from Devon originally.
I am. I'm originally from the West Country, though I was born in Hammersmith, Queen Charlotte's. And I was taken down there by my father, who'd broken up with my mother in Italy, and taken down to the West Country, and then brought up with my grandparents, and then finally adopted by the cleaner who used to cook and clean at the house. And I grew up with her and the milkman, who was her husband. And then I came back to London in 1993, and I was at music college for 5 years. So yes,
because you're very musical, aren't you?
That was my original profession. That's what I originally did. I came back to London to study piano, to study the organ, and to do all of that at music college. So that's what I did. But yes, grew up in Devon. As far as I was concerned, I was a Devon boy through and through. But it's funny how, everything kind of draws you back, and it feels quite normal, and it feels quite nice to be back in Fulham, which is where I began my existence, really.
Yeah. So is it more difficult to make a living as a musician or a magician?
I would say that it's probably... I remember being in septets and sextets and quartets and quintets and thinking to myself, blimey, this money's got to be split 6 ways and 5 ways and 4 ways. And and I remember sometimes seeing these guys walk in with little cases, and there were my guys lugging in huge speaker cabs and goodness knows what, and I've ended up, I think, on the right side of things. Yeah,
and also, it's only you now, you're not split. I'm in a double act, so I have to split the money in 2. That really annoys me from time to time.
Oh, you can charge double, can't you?
No, not a chance. I've charged less when he's on board.
You didn't hear
that. So what about magic? When did magic bite you? Was that from a kid or a little bit later?
No, it bit me as a kid. Watching, obviously, as we all did. We had Paul Daniels on the television. We used to watch him. That's all we had. And you know what? It was brilliant stuff. And I feel like Neb on that one, Neb, our colleague in magic, and he said there was a time when I thought Daniels was a little bit, passé and very uncool. He said, and the better a magician I became, the more accomplished a magician I became, and the more accomplished performer I became, Neb said. He said, the more I realised how brilliant Paul Daniels was.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. So any Paul Daniels fans out there listening in, yes, up for dear old Paul, God bless him, with his chop cup in the sky.
Yes, absolutely. And if you've never listened to it, I sat down with Paul Daniels about 7 or 8 months before he passed away and talked about his entire career. It's episode 44 on this podcast feed. I would urge you to go and listen to it if you never have. It's over, I think it's 2 hours long. 2 hours with the great man.
It must be the Encyclopedia Britannica of podcasts.
Well,
really, Richard.
Not really. I'm just trying to keep up with the guy who does the Comedian podcast.
17, what was it? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know, actually. I've no idea. But yeah, no. Thank you for doing this today, by the way.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a joy to do it.
I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get to you. I've got a long list of people. You were always on the list.
Well, I thought Crumsy must be scraping the bottom of the barrel.
No, not at all. In fact, of course you have to be on this because I, in my research, have done a little bit of digging and I realise, I believe this is true, that about 10 years ago, you did more television magic in this country than anyone. Is that true? There's a period of time?
That is actually the truth. It's very bizarre. It's one of those things that just kind of came and went, and nobody, there's no trumpets and no heraldic anything. But the thing was that in those days it was before things went digital, and I had come back into magic at that point. And I'd come back into magic for about 1.5 years after having, as I say, as a child, coming out of it, then coming up to music college, and then studying music, and then being very much involved in a black Pentecostal church, playing piano for a gospel choir, and having a band and one thing and another else. And those dear sisters convinced me that I should put my foot on all my magic. And they convinced me I should get rid of it all. See, God bless them. But no, and I literally put my foot on all of it and threw it all in the bin because they said to me it was all illusion and deception and I shouldn't be doing it. And being younger and not really much of a thinker at the time, more of a musician, just a musician, I got rid of it all. And I thought maybe they were right. And of course, well, bless their hearts, I have to beg to differ with them these days.
Yes, absolutely.
But then I got back into it and just met this guy randomly called Ray. Can't remember his surname now. But he was making this thing. He had this. There was a new channel called Game In TV, and he wanted just half an hour magic show, just basic stuff. And he said, "I've only got really one camera, and I haven't got a sound man or anything. Do you know anyone that could hold it above their heads?" And I said, well, I could probably bring someone. And but I went for an interview with him, and of course I wear my top hat around the place. It's what I do anyway. And other people went for an interview with him as well. Ray Addison, that was his name, Ray Addison. And I went for this interview with him, and other people had gone for this interview with him. And then I left. And then I got the phone call, and he said, "Yes, I'd like you to do this thing." And it actually reminding me, it came tenuously through Christian Lee. Do you know Christian Lee?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
It came tenuously through him because he said, well, "Why don't you give it a go?" And then Ray rang me, and I said, "Well, why did you give me the job as opposed to other people?" He said, "I'll tell you why." He said, "Because when you left after the meeting, I watched to see if you'd remove your top hat. I wanted to see if you were, And he said, "I noticed you didn't remove your top hat and you carried on your way and you went here and you went there and I kept watching and then you went down into the tube and you were still wearing your top hat." And he said, and I thought, that's interesting. It's an interesting guy. I think I'll try and work with him.
And it is interesting because I've got to just stop you there for a second. I've walked in here today and you are like a magician, like people would imagine a magician because you live with a rabbit.
I do.
And
batteries not included.
And there's a top hat on the side, and you really do. I've also heard a rumor that you occasionally go to gigs with a chicken in your coat. Is that true?
Oh yeah. I've always wanted to. Whenever I was doing things, I always wanted to try to think about impact in a routine, and I always started with what do I want to do, and nothing's going to stop me from reaching the ideal form, and if I can't reach the ideal form, I'll get as damn near to it as I can. And I had this idea of producing a chicken, and I rang Pat Page about it years ago, and Pat said he had some method of producing it, but it was in silk handkerchiefs or something or other. I thought, I don't want to do it that way, I want to produce it from my jacket. And then we filmed Undercover Magic, and Scott had this idea of producing a chicken, and he had a chicken bag that was connected to my back, but the problem with that was...
This is Scott Penrose?
Scott Penrose, yeah.
Yes.
This was when we shot Undercover with Objective Productions, and basically this thing made me look like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But it was all right, provided it was all right for TV. Like a lot of magic's all right for TV, provided you square onto the camera. You know, you can make. Well, anyone can look good on TV, really. I mean, you know, provided you square onto the camera and you've got the right camera angles, you can make it look like a miracle. But in real life, that doesn't work. And so I started experimenting with a toppet, and I realised a chicken was very happy in a toppet, and especially because I wear a long frock coat, I tried various different things, because in my, as you know, my cup and ball routine, I produce a hamster and a chicken and sometimes chicks as well. And
that must be a pain, right? They're not chicks for very long. Where do you get chicks from if you want to do chicks for cups and balls?
Well, I mean, I had friends who were connected to farms in Welwyn Garden City and so on and so forth, and it was always a struggle. But that's why I bought a hamster, because the hamster was... I was able to have the chicken in the toppet and the hamster in a pocket. But the problem was I soon realised that the hamster would poke its head out the pocket, which wasn't a good look for in the middle of a routine. So what I then did is I realised you have to put a zip. So I had a zip tailored into the pocket, and also I realised from my own personal experience that hamsters do like to chew on things, and believe you me, I've had a fair few moments on stage where things that you didn't want chewed were chewed. And, you know, it gives a cup and balls routine a very new meaning. And anyway, so what I did is I then double-lined the pocket with denim. It's double-lined denim. And then you put bedding in the pocket. And then you put food in the pocket. And then you put the hamster in, close it up, and he's fine. He doesn't get in the way of the chicken because the chicken's a bit lower in the frock coat, and so on and so forth. And then I've got my various other loads, like the bottle, which goes up the back and just hangs down. Thanks to David Penn, who gave me a very wonderful, helpful tip on that with regard to tubey grip, which is brilliant. Thank you, David Penn, if you're listening in. And that goes at the back, plus an Inviso torch that goes up the left shoulder, which gives me a flash of fire to produce the bottle, plus all the other balls that go up the sleeve and hide as the sleeve is up, plus the basic routine. So, I think the reason I do this is because I feel like Max Mellini. They once asked Max Mellini, how long would you wait for a routine? And he said, I'd wait a week. I'm not the kind of guy that's a kind of like, well, just carry a deck of cards and, it's going to fill out my pockets. And, honestly, what kind of an excuse is that for good magic? Oh, it's going to fill up my pockets and make my pockets bulky. And, do whatever is necessary to produce the most impact possible. And then I feel the same way. And whatever it is, in Mellini's case, he used to carry an ice cube, a large ice cube, with ice tongs in his jacket, and then it used to drip. But, for the sake of the effect and the payoff and for what the audience get, it's worth you suffering a little. One night we blagged our way into Home House, and there I met a series producer from Carlton, and her name was Colette Valentine, and I just said, you go out some nights and you just take a few things with you. Well, I did when I wasn't really working very much, because, in magic, you don't immediately get jobs. It doesn't work like that. You start by kind of I was, at the time, I think I was doing Clean Easy, giving out Clean Easy products.
I looked at that once. Does it really work?
Well, it did in the short term, but the trouble was I would spend all the money, And then I'd have to pay Clean Easy, and I'd never have any money left to pay them, so they ditched me in the end.
Brilliant. So this is a period of time where you're working a little bit as a musician.
Yes.
You're trying to start the magic. You've got Clean Easy on the side.
Yeah.
And then you're starting to get some interest from TV.
Colette shows me interest in Home House, and I'm doing all this blagging, and because I think when you're in your 20s, you're much more, or at least I was, much more teleological in your approach. You're constantly end directed. I look at someone like Julius Dean or Dine, whatever it is, amazing energy and spunk and constantly putting out new things. And I found in my 20s that interested me more, that kind of being driven side of things, career driven, than it does at 40. I'm not career driven, I'm people driven now. I was career driven, I'm now people driven.
Is that partly because you've got a bit more money now?
Partly, and also when you've ticked a few boxes, you know, and you feel, well, what have I got to prove, really? Who have I got to prove it to? And, you know, and I think a lot of that comes, and possibly from my childhood, having been adopted and having never met my mother for, 30 odd years, and then finally finding my mother and finding out that she had mental health issues, but I shifted from being a very kind of goal-orientated person to being a very people-orientated person in meeting my mother. And from meeting my mother, I went on to run marathons for mental health issues, and I've gone on to help other sports people with their...
Do you mind sharing the story of how you met your mother after 30 years?
No,
That sounds amazing.
Not at all.
So you mentioned your mum and dad split up. You mentioned that at the beginning.
Yeah, in Italy, and they split up. My father brought me back to the UK, and he gave me to his grandparents. He was living in London, but his grandparents were living in a manor house in Wanham, because his mother had that estate handed down from her mother, who was Favouretta Walterina Kennard. And she had remarried. She'd first married a guy called Sir... he was a baronet anyway. And he divorced her, and then she was scorned, and then she remarried this ex-serviceman who was in the Royal Navy. It was my grandfather, Commander Somerset. And then she... That's right, he was... the first husband was Warmington, Sir Marshal Warmington. And then she remarried my grandfather, Commander Somerset. So they had this estate, but grandfather was a terrible gambler, because they had more than one outhouse. They had lots of outhouses and stables, and he was a terrible horse gambler. And he gambled the money away, gambled estate after estate after estate away, until they were just left with this Wanham house. And I think that they stayed together purely because they'd gotten themselves into bad patterns. But I remember them. He was always a grumpy old swine, and she was always very elegant and graceful, and used to love to throw dinner parties. And he used to want to go in a corner and just be on his own, and he was a recovering alcoholic, so he was off the alcohol, he was completely dry, and he couldn't bear that she was always a socialite and drinking. And my father had a fraught relationship with his father. And my father was a child of the 60s, and foppish long hair, studied classics in Scotland, wrote plays, started up the Fired Earth Company, was an artist, spoke many languages, well-travelled. And my grandfather was military. That kind of everything must be not arty at all. And you know what it's like when you ever try to get a gig for a military person? It's a nightmare. I remember when I was doing a residency once in a place, and the manager said, "Well, I got to go now." He was Portuguese. He said, "There's a guy coming in. He's military rugby." I thought, "Oh, there goes my residency," and it did. But my grandfather was military, but my father wasn't. My father was very artistic, and he brought me there to Wanham House. And my grandmother wanted to go to Australia to see her sister, who'd been taken over there with Winifred, who was her mother. And she said, "Well, we can't really look after Max." But my father was then sadly diagnosed with a brain tumour. This was 1982. And they said, "Well, you can't have him because you're dying, and we can't have him because we're old." So there was a woman that used to cook and clean at the house who'd had a hysterectomy called Shirley Priddle. And she was married to a milkman, and they said, "Well, we'll give him to her." So my father came to the house, and they said, well, where's my son? They said, well, we've given him to Shirley. She said, well, you just can't give my son away. And she said, well, we've given him to Shirley. You can't look after him. You're dying. Typical old money talk. Well, darling, you're dying. You can't look after him, so we've given him to the housemaid. Kind of thing. And Shirley brought me up, and I grew up in a little council house in Bampton. So it was very odd for me growing up with a milkman and his wife, Shirley and Mervyn Priddle, and then on weekends going into this big house and then coming back to this small house and going to this big house and to this small house. But what I can do, I can honestly say, is it doesn't matter where I am or who I'm with, I can pretty much relate to where people are at. When I go back to the West Country, it's glorious to be there and to be with all my old friends and so on and so forth, and then the accent comes back a little bit, like that. And then but if I find myself in a situation like I was when I did C. Orlin's wedding down at Longleat House, I don't feel intimidated in those circles, because I'm sorry to say it, but it's the same bullshit whichever way you look at it, whether it's down there or whether it's up there. Yeah. It just has a slightly different accent.
It is probably one of the biggest skills you can learn as a magician, isn't it? Being able to work for different types of people and being able to fit in at different types of events, because you're not always going to play to the same type of people, are you?
No, absolutely. And I think that as Sophie said, Sophie that was on Sorcerers Apprentice, she said, and she was right, that the magician is primarily a professional party guest. If you're going to be doing that walk around stuff, you've got to be someone that can relate to people, that can talk to people, that can make conversation, that can keep the ball going forward and backwards, and then you can start to throw in the magic and have a little bit of fun with it. But essentially, you've got to be a likable person, not someone. I've heard this thing about magicians, are doing this because they've got no social skills. Well, if you've got no social skills, then don't work socially.
Yes.
Work on your social skills. And that's okay. Yes, you might hide behind your magic to start with, but, you can gain social skills, you can learn confidence, and it's okay. And you do it by just doing it, by just getting out there and talking to people, and you might be in uncomfortable circumstances and situations, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel doing it, and you'll understand that different people might use different terminologies than you're used to in one circle of friends. But once you get used to the little buzzwords and the little terminologies that they use, you'll soon realise that it's just the same thing, but just a different hat.
Sorry, we were talking about how you discovered your mum. Right?
Yes, absolutely. So I lost my father. He died of a brain tumour. And then I lost my adopted father. And I lost my adopted mother, who died. They both died. One died of leukemia and one died of breast cancer. And then I lost my grandmother, and then I had a nervous breakdown. And that's where I made the break between music and magic. And eventually I was then the only one left. And I thought, well, who's going to bury me? And it's a really weird thing when you're young and you see all your memories die around you like that. I know what it's like. I kind of have an inkling of what it must be like to be old and having lost everyone and think, well, I'm the only one that carries those memories. Because I can't say to Mum, my adopted mum, Shirley, I can't say, well, what was I like at 12 or 11? What was I really like? What kind of... I remember how I perceived I was at the time, but it's as you get older and older, you can then find out in retrospect the kind of person you are. So my life has been very much a jigsaw puzzle, trying to piece things together. And when I lost them, I said, well, what stops me changing my name back from when I lost my adopted father I lost him in 2001 or 2000. And I lost him and I lost Granny at the same year. And I said, what's going to stop me changing my name back to Somerset, which is what I was by birth? Because I'd gone, by adoption, Hugh, Maximilian, Liberty, Fortoboschi, de Ptolemy, both at Somerset Priddle. And then I went back by birth to Maximilian Liberty de Ptolemy, Somerset. So I went back to Somerset. And I thought, if I do that, maybe someone will look for me. Maybe I can find my blood family. But I was told by my adopted parents that my mother was dead. I think that, and they said, she was in a mental institute. She wasn't very well and she died. And I met this man called Robert Barrett, who was a private investigator and also a genealogist. And he did some research for me, and I found out through him that I had a half brother and a half sister. I didn't know I had them. I found out that my mother was still alive, and I was told that she'd passed away. I went through all sorts of emotions over it. And I thought, well, where are all these people? So I got him on the case, and he managed to track down Richard Imrie, who was in Hawaii, who was my mother's sister's first husband. And once Richard Imrie had been found, and now we're fast forwarding to about, because it took a while before I got there, from the name change, my father dying, to the name change, to my great aunt in the West Country dying. That was between the period of 2001 to 2006. And then in 2007, I went to New Zealand and met my 103-year-old great aunt on my grandfather's side. And she managed to fill me in, because obviously grandfather was very old, my father had died. I was an only child, he was an only child. So she managed to fill me in on all my history and how my grandfather had come from New Zealand to the UK, and what it was like living in New Zealand with my grandfather being one of 4 siblings and so on. So I got that side of things. And then Richard Imrie, having been contacted, because this private investigator managed to find quite a lot of these people. But firstly, Richard Imrie, who contacted my aunt in Los Angeles, and she then was given my number, and she contacted me. And she said, have you heard from your mother? And I said, no, I don't know where mother is. And none of us knew. She said, well, you need to contact your family in Switzerland. So then all of a sudden now, from having no family and having lost all my adopted family, I then all of a sudden had this huge family, and everyone advised me against it. Don't go digging up, you don't know what you're digging up, etc., etc., etc. But that's the point. You don't know what you're digging up. So what? So I looked into it, and if any one of you, if you're struggling with this, and maybe there's a sibling or a parent that you don't know or whatever, my advice to you is as someone who is now constantly in touch with his mother. She is as mad as a March hare, and she drives me mad, but I'd have it no other way. And I would recommend to you, don't be nervous of it. I know that you have to be sensitive if you have adoptive parents and so on and so forth living, but don't be nervous of it. And I would, if you can, and if it seems right, and you can contact them and you can find them, and just either get closure on it or build a relationship with them. In my case, I built a relationship with my mother. I found her in Switzerland. The Swiss side of the family managed to contact her. She was part of the social care system. And they said, your son's looking for you. And she sent a message back and said, well, it's nearly Christmas, so I'll come over to Bern, to your house, Shirin, that's my cousin, and whoever wants to meet me can meet me there, which I thought was a very funny thing, odd thing to say.
One of the things you did mention halfway through there was that you had a breakdown yourself.
Yes, I did.
When everybody died.
Yeah, it's the whole world, my epistemic paradigm, what I thought was important, the things that I thought mattered didn't matter. I think the loss of a loved one, or the loss of loved ones, in my case it was a loss of a lot of loved ones, makes you really rethink reality and think, well, what's this all about? What am I doing? What am I here to do? Just to earn the money to buy the food, to get the strength, to go to work, to earn the money to buy the food, and I think Chris Hitchens is right when he says, if there is no objective purpose, as human beings, it's impossible to live that way. And I think that probably says more about what is objective purpose. I think it probably points to an objective purpose personally. I work it backwards, But I like magic for that. I think magic's wonderful for that, because magic challenges our epistemic paradigms, and it makes us rethink about what's real and what's not. Not in as much as when we're performing magic, not in that people think that the magic's real, because we know it's not real. We know it's a trick. But it reminds us that we haven't got the whole world sewn up. It reminds us that the way that we're looking at things in that instance is not the way that it really is. And there's a different way of thinking going on there, a way that we're not thinking. And so we've looked at it and our brain's frozen. And people's jaw drop, or they laugh, or whatever, because all of a sudden you've assaulted their epistemic paradigm, in that moment. And I like magic for that. I think magic is a great signpost. Contrary to the way that magic's being used at the moment, I think in some quarters quite cheaply to expose psychics and to expose healers, and sort of it's being used almost. And I mean this as reverently as possible. And I know that there are production companies out there that are thinking, well, what sells and so on and so forth, being used to almost to support or peddle a slightly epistemological agenda, that only your five senses matter, and the naturalist reductionist agenda. And I think magic's neutral, and I think that the reality is we live in an amazing world and we're conscious beings, and what the hell is that? The hard problem of consciousness, no one knows what consciousness is. No one has a flipping clue what it is. You can say, well, a chair is a piece of furniture, but consciousness is a what? It's the most amazing thing, and
you're talking about how magic's used to debunk things, or magicians often obsessed with debunking spiritualism and mediums and all of that kind of thing.
And I think that that's to trivialise it, because I think the reality is, people like James Randi who are magicians and so on and so forth, well, if you can truly bend a spoon in my office, or if you can truly do a drawing duplication in my office, then I'll give... But spirituality is not about drawing duplications, and it's not about bending spoons. That's to trivialise it. It's about the sunset. It's about loving and being loved. It's about the wonder of a newborn baby, and that the sum total is greater than the parts. What's that all about? What's that all about? And the wonder that we have that one physical thing, i.e. this thing up here, which I'm tapping, which is on the top of my head, which is now bald, this thing can appreciate and comprehend another thing. That's crazy. Forget spoon bending. And forget drawing duplications. I'm talking about real spirituality. And magic is a wonderful way of, when I did Max Magic, I wanted to present a sealed hermetic world and say, what if I could bring a person, and I like that about magic. I don't like to be the person that says, this is me, I'm the great magician, watch this and be amazed. I like to say, wouldn't it be amazing if in a world I could bring you into a world where weird and wonderful things just happen? And that was what Max Magic did. The series Max Magic, it brought people into a weird and wonderful world where we didn't say, oh, and look, another trick.
Yeah.
It was about bringing people into a weird and wonderful world where magic just happens. Well, we kind of live in that world, really. DNA is a 3 billion word code in every one of our 10 trillion cells in our body. You could fit the entire literature of the entire world on a pinhead if it were translated into DNA. People talk about significance and insignificance, that little blue dot on the edge of the Milky Way that is us. But the reality of the matter is, forget that. The size doesn't matter. It's all crazy when you think about it. It's all magic. Yeah. And magic reminds us of that.
The Magicians Podcast brought to you in association with the Magic Circle, the world's premier magical society. Are you ready to join the world's most exclusive magic club? Visit themagiccircle.co.uk to find out more.
Gigi-O, free for 30 days. Be a pro, get Gigi-O.
This seems like the perfect moment to wish Martin Rowland and his new wife Cassandra a huge congratulations on their wedding a few weeks ago. Martin, you all know, of course, is the genius behind Gigi-O. It's a web-based software designed for professional and semi-professional entertainers anywhere in the world. It will save you hours in the office every single week. It generates PDF contracts and invoices. It tracks your payments. It updates the diary on your phone automatically. It's now fully integrated with PayPal. And you can even schedule emails to your clients. So if you have events which you do annually, you can schedule emails to your clients to make getting those repeat bookings easier than ever. If you go to the website right now, gigio.co.uk, you can take a free 30-day trial. That's a wedding gift from Martin to you, ladies and gentlemen. The website again, gigio.co.uk. Gigio is spelled Gigio.co.uk.
Whether you're new to magic or a seasoned professional, Alakazam Magic are here to help. Alakazam have been supplying magic to magicians for well over 20 years. Not only do we carry all the latest and greatest magic tricks, books and DVDs, but we also manufacture one of the finest ranges of magic tricks in the world. The Alakazam name is synonymous with great customer service, educated advice and honesty. So if you're shopping for new magic, make sure you check out our website, www.alakazam.co.uk, or pay a visit to our fully stocked shop.
Holy shit, where are we going from here? I love it, Max. Thank you. That was brilliant.
It was a pleasure.
I appreciate the passion there, and I think it's really, really interesting.
Obviously, if people are interested in the family story, to get it out of my system, I did the stage show, which they, God bless them, gave me a Carlton Comedy Award for, which I think is ironic given that I'm supposed to be a magician. But there we are.
I've heard great things about this show. I never saw it. This is a friend of mine saw it and loved it. Do you want to talk a little bit about your show?
Yeah, I worked with a man I love dearly called Paul Rothman, who I got on it to direct it and keep his eye on it, because Paul is a brilliant actor and a brilliant director, and I said, Paul, my problem is I have a tendency to waffle, just in case anyone listening in hadn't noticed. And Paul said, what you need, Max, is you need to be trained down and stripped down, and let's think about, the show, because you want to get this off your chest, you want to be able to share the story. Let's think about the show and the best way of doing that. So I talk about in the show the casino in Green Park, and there's a trick in there called the human fruit machine, which is a kind of a weird and wonderful trick. You can see it if you go Vimeo, Max Somerset Signature Tricks. You can see the show online.
You did it at the Magic Circle.
I did it at the Magic Circle. I did it 2 or 3 times, and and that story alone, going in and out of that casino, and not realizing that my sister was working on the floor of the casino. Bizarre, walking in and out week after week past my sister and not knowing it, things like that, and they all come out in this theatre show called Signature Tricks, and Nigel Mansell, we had him, he was in the audience, and we got him up on stage, and I smashed his watch, because Signature Tricks, obviously the lovely thing about it was it had a thing about it, because signature being my signature being me, and Signature Tricks being the tricks that I've created as a response to the things in my life which have interested me, whether philosophical or artistic or musical or family life or whatever it might be. So that's the show there. That
you mentioned Nigel Mansell. Let's just touch on Nigel quickly, because there's a whole chapter in Nigel Mansell, the Formula One driver, of course, you all know what we're talking about. There's a chapter in his book called Saved by Magic, I think, and you've developed a friendship with him. I think you've been to Jersey where he lives to help him with his own magic and things like that.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Is that where the friendship began, when you pulled him up on stage that
Well,
night?
it's funny actually. I mean, it's in his book, Nigel Mansell, Staying on Track. I met him at an event. I was just there, and he had a very bad crash in Le Mans. Very bad crash. I saw it on TV. Actually, he was doing. He was him and his sons, Greg and Leo, and they were doing this relay together. And they had a very, very bad crash, and he then had speech problems and hand-eye coordination problems, and one thing another else, and
concussions as well, I think.
I think he had all of that.
Yeah.
Yes, he had all of that, and it was very, very bad. And he found it very humiliating.
People who hear that word concussion, it's something really I'm fascinated by, is concussions. They're worth looking into. There's a lot that happens when you get a concussion, and it can have all different types of outcomes on your personality and your, exactly what you said, your speech and things like that. When you get a concussion, sometimes it means you're never going to be the same person again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because my mother also, she had a Ferrari accident in her 20s, and the Ferrari went over the edge of a cliff in Bern and landed on a roof, thank God, and she had a concussion, but she was never the same woman again. I think that's probably where it started.
Yeah.
But the situation with Nigel was he says in his little, he's got a whole chapter here, and I love this chapter, Saved by Magic. See, that for me, that makes me happy. Seeing magic, as I said, as a signpost, as a way of thinking about the bigger picture. And he says he stayed in his room. I'll read you a little bit. He says, over the weeks, the speech improved only slightly, and certainly not enough for me to work up the courage to venture out again. I had a lengthy phase during which I wouldn't go out. And even if people were in the house visiting, I wouldn't engage with them because I knew my words wouldn't come out properly. It was a horrible time. The headaches were vicious too, really painful. In the immediate term, I didn't go out of the front door for some time. very gradually my speech started to improve but remained far from normal. Roseanne was concerned that I was essentially becoming a recluse, so she was keen to try to coax me out of the house. At first, I kicked against this. In my moments of clarity, though, I knew I had to challenge my brain to start operating properly again. Agreeing to go out with Roseanne one night to be with a few friends over dinner is one of the most intimidating things I've ever done. But thank goodness I did, because that's how I found magic, and it changed my life. Magic has literally been my saviour. You might wonder what on earth card tricks and magic have to do with brain injury, but bear with me on this, like I said. And Roseanne knows, Nigel, you have to go and try something out. You have to give it a go. She pushed, and eventually I gave in and agreed to go out to a very good friend's house for a small celebration party they were having. When I got there, they had a magician going around entertaining the guests. And this immediately put me at ease, because it meant I could watch the magic and not have to make lots of conversation with people. The magician was a very flamboyant individual called Max Somerset, complete with a pristine top black hat. And he was doing the most amazing tricks, and I'm very inquisitive by nature, so I was trying to work out how he was doing these tricks. He then performed some close-up tricks that were fantastic. I tried to talk to him slowly, and it was a little jumbled, but fortunately Max was extremely patient and made me feel very comfortable. I said, will you show me how you do that? Obviously, as all professional magicians should, he declined and politely explained that as a member of the circle, it was forbidden for him to reveal the secrets. And I said, I can tell you if you're a member of the magic circle. Well, how do you become a member of that then? By being invited. And why would I be invited if I don't know any tricks? You won't be, said Max. It was a catch-22. Anyway, so that's how it began. And I met Nigel, and then he invited me back, and he plucked up the courage to ask me, look, would I take him aside? Would I help him with this? And so I was very patient with him. And I would go around to his daughter's house and try and take him through some tricks to help to bring about some confidence again and bring about some life back into this system that had just gone wrong. And we worked together, and we're still working together, and I'm still teaching him magic, and he's now regained all of his hand-eye coordination and his speech, and he really chalks it up to the magic. He genuinely chalks it up. It made him think differently. It made him work differently. It gave him a resolve to try to do things. Don't eat the cables, Milo.
I'm sorry, man.
Don't eat the cables.
Your rabbit is trying to chew its way through the cable.
Don't
for the
eat
laptop.
the cables. Don't eat the cables, Milo. Sit. I call him Milo. Well, he's not actually a boy, he's a girl. But I only found that out afterwards, but I haven't got the heart to tell him.
Don't tell him.
I won't tell him.
Yeah, don't tell him. No, he won't take that well.
No, I won't tell him. But anyway, so that's how it began with him, and since him, I've been much more involved in the sports side of things, and it's bizarre how the door opened up. I never thought magic and sports would go together, but when I read that someone like that, where magic has changed their life, and people like Richard McDougall out there going out taking magic to people who have physical problems and mental problems and so on, and it's bringing about confidence in their lives and bringing about change in their lives, that's what I think is wonderful about magic. It's so much more than just entertainment.
And this is where the shift happens with you, because you move away from being career focused, trying to be on TV, making money, to actually realising that magic can do, well, in your opinion, something much more worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Than just becoming a famous rich magician.
Absolutely. I think it can challenge and change lives. Challenge people to think differently. I think magic can, aside from entertainment, I think magic can also give people a new lease of life. I'm not, I know the magic circle is indicilis provada loqui, it's not apt to share secrets and so on and so forth. But when those secrets are going to save lives, and Nigel showed an interest, I'm liberal in giving someone a trick or two. I don't wait for them to swear undying professionalism. Don't eat the cable. I don't wait for them. Stop it. Come here, Milo. Sit here. Right. I don't wait for them to swear undying professionalism before I share magic with them, because Stuart Hayes, who's a former Olympian, 2012 Olympian, another one, had 5 years of rehabilitation for a broken ankle and had to come out of... all he could be was a domestique in the 2012 Olympics, but that was still amazing. He was domestique for the Brownie brothers in triathlon, and he was there on the front riding the bike, being the pacemaker. But, he's another one that has found a new lease of life in learning magic tricks. He might never be a professional magician. Nigel might never be the greatest magician on the planet. It doesn't matter. If your aim is to summit a mountain this high and you get up there and you're happy, who am I to take away your happiness? If you want to summit a higher mountain, summit a higher one. But what matters is the process. It's not the winning. And Paul Rothman says this. It's not the getting to the finish line. It's not the going over the finish line. It's the journey that you take that matters. And I see magic bringing about so much happiness and bringing about such a change in people's lives. And that means so much to me now. I think we did the AJ Bell triathlon together, myself, Stuart Hayes and Gadget Man. We had to do this thing called a celebrity relay. Why they pulled me in, I have no idea. But I think it's because I can do a 20-minute 5K, just under a 20-minute 5K, 1932. And I did it with them. And, and that was a charity thing as well. But these kind of things, I never saw magic as having so many diverse and different ways of filtering in to the good of society. And that's where I think, we should be thinking just outside of the little corners of our just pure performance-orientated thinking.
Yeah. So I'm a big Formula One fan, and I knew Nigel was a big Magic fan because he came to see Champions of Magic. Nigel Mansell lives in Jersey, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And we took the Champions of Magic show there last summer, and he came to the theatre to see the show. And I knew he was in, and I was very nervous because I knew he was in, because I'm a big fan.
Well, Nigel, he adores magic. He absolutely adores it. He's like a kid with a candy stick, and he loves to work on stuff. And I think that passion can override a lot of those hand-eye coordination issues. Because if you find something with that, got something that gives you that passion, it helps you jump those psychological, mental and physical gates a little bit. It gives you that extra propulsion. And that's what's happened with Nigel, I think. And it's what's happening with Stuart Hayes.
This obviously, we have jumped forward a little bit. Let's go back a little bit to when you were in that period of your career where you were doing a lot of television. Obviously, everyone will know you from Max Magic, and then is it fair to say probably the thing that gave you the highest profile was the Sorcerers Apprentice? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, first, as I say, this gaming TV thing just rolled around, and then we did Max Magic, and they put that thing on Sky, and they used to repeat it endlessly back in 2004, all 6 episodes. People used to think there were more, but there never were. They just used to repeat them all endlessly. And they used to go on, and the irony was, as I said, I was then the most televised magician between about 2004 and 2007, which was bizarre. And then from there, we went to Sorcerers Apprentice. And Sorcerers Apprentice...
You get the Sorcerers Apprentice off the back of Max Magic, do you?
I think it was Etienne Pradier put a good word in for me. I think they were looking to do this show down at 2020 Television. And Etienne said, and I love Etienne, and Etienne said, try Max Somerset, and they had a number of people lined up. I think David Burglass was lined up for it. And I went in and they said, would you be interested? I went in and they said, do you have any tricks to show us? So I remember going in there and I sneezed a goldfish and then I produced a chicken. But the funny thing was, the way I did it was, we were talking and I was looking to do some other trick with an egg. And I did this trick with the egg, and then I said, sorry, I can't find the egg, just hang on a second. And then I pulled the chicken out of the jacket, and I put the chicken on the table, drew no attention to it, and then looked for the egg, and they said, oh, sorry, I think I've just given the trick away. So, of course, you know how it's done now. Of course, the egg comes from the chicken. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. Never mind, I'll show you something else. And I left the chicken there on the table the whole time, and we had this interview with the chicken clucking around and crapping on the table, And that was... Because at that time, after Max Magic, I'd had numerous meetings with... and anyone that's worked in TV, they chew you up, they spit you out. You do one thing and another thing. And TV companies, they want you when they want to contact you. And if they don't want to contact you, they don't contact you. And that's the way that it is. So I grew a bit tired and cynical of these kind of meetings with production companies. Though I'd had some good ones, I'd had some bad ones. Anyway, I thought, well, I'll have fun with this one. And I did. And I did this. And they... that stuck in their minds, and so they said, would you be interested in being one of the teachers? And I said, no, I won't be one of the teachers, because the teachers have to reveal magic tricks, and I'm a member of the magic circle, so I can't. So they said, well, would you be interested in being the sorcerer? And I said, yeah, I'll do that, as long as I don't have to reveal any magic tricks. So that's how I got round having to reveal any magic tricks. And it was that show that inspired, I think, a whole generation of young people. I talked to people like, for example, Henry White, or Mark Kirstein. Some of these guys, I had no idea just how influential I was on a younger generation of magicians. And I think that's what that show did.
Yeah. When you're going through the process of, obviously you make those programs and then they finish and then you go back to the drawing board again, right? You're then back to trying to get back on TV again and again. Is that you just draw tired of that process really? Was that why you sort of stopped, or is it just ultimately one day you just can't do it anymore?
I just, it's just that thing for me of, if I was going to be on a roll and we were going to, I know that, with certain production companies, you go in, you're a part of their thing, and you sign up and you have to be part of their thing and continue being part of their thing. And I refused to sign anything like that. I didn't want to sign anything like that, to continually be held in under one production company, one production house. I wouldn't do that. And, the first production company, was Carlton Television. And the wonderful thing was everyone on that production was so enthused about magic. They weren't like some production companies have made so much magic, and you can see in some of those shows where there's a lack of enthusiasm in the production team. You can see it through the camera lenses. But with this show, we had really enthusiastic DPs, we had really enthusiastic producer, we had assistant producer, series producer, a really enthusiastic controller whose wife worked at Sky, and they loved, and they would take it home, and the kids would watch it, and that was the way that they decided. They didn't all sit around. He took it home to his wife, and she sat down with the kids and watched it, and they laughed their heads off, and they said, yeah, let's TXS, let's transmit this stuff. And that's how they did it. And I like that process. I think a happy ship makes for a good journey. And that's how we did that. Left that, went on to do Undercover Magic. Because Carlton folded and got taken over by ITV and Sky. We were then into second series of Max Magic, but what happened was they were still in negotiations, and we were down in ITV. I was there in Mark Well's office, and we were there going through, pre-production stuff and going through ideas and stuff, and then they'd go into negotiation meetings, because ITV were a much bigger organisation than Carlton and wanted a lot more money. And eventually relationships broke down, Objective stepped in, and then they did Undercover Magic. We did one season of that. And then they started repeating Max Magic on Sky One again, which was bizarre. So this continued going on, this repeating. And then from there, Sorcerers Apprentice came up. So there wasn't a huge lull in between the two. Though in between that, there was a studio show I did in Fountain Studios called Strangely Talented, which was a precursor of Britain's Got Talent, which was most bizarre. And we did a non-transmissible pilot of that, and that was a lot of fun. And then from there into The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And that series was on the BBC, and that was a great series to do. The first series was wonderful. Then they went for a second and third series, and I just felt that I could sense that the way that it was made, the way that it was put together, it just wasn't so good. But I've always worked in my shows with small budgets, because they've never had big budgets for magic. So I've always had to find ways of, and I've always been interested in, as I said to you, is narrative, story. I've always been interested in structure, because as a musician, I'm interested in something that has a holistic structure to it. A magic trick must be structured and must have a very satisfying impact. It must have a satisfying ending. And Scott Penrose is right when he says, if you can somehow bring something back that was at the beginning, at the end,
Full circle,
you created a wonderful structure.
There's been some darker moments in your career as well. One of which I wanted to touch on actually was, I remember a few years ago you were mugged quite badly, weren't you, on Was it on the way back from a gig or on
Yes,
the way to a gig?
I'd just done a show down at the Guildhall with Jack, the ex-president of the Magic Circle, and there were a couple of others there as well. And then I went from there. I had a residency at the Playboy Club, and I went to the Playboy Club afterwards. That was a tough residency. and I went down there, and no, stop biting. And I went down there, and then afterwards I came home, and I was in the top hat, and it was Christmas time, and I got to the top of my road, and there was a guy came running towards me, and I turned around and he backed off, and I thought, right, okay, I think I'm all right. And the phone was flat. It was an old iPhone 4, they always were, and I ran round the corner, and this guy turned me around, hit me across the head, and I fell on the floor, and then he put his knee in my back, pulled my watch off, and the lights came on of a car that was parked outside of my house, which was like a getaway car. And the guy ran across, and I thought, and all I said while I was on the floor, I had my bags, all I said when he hit me across the head was, all I shouted out was, "I'm a magician." That's all I remember shouting out. It just came out. "I'm a magician." That's all I said. I don't know whether it spooked him or what, but he took the watch, ran to the car, the lights switched on, he jumped in the car and they drove off.
Yeah.
Ended up with the police saying he was uneconomical to pursue. But aside from that, because all the cameras you see are pointing out at the road where the vehicles are, not on because they can get the money from the vehicle, but they can't get the money necessarily on the pavement where the...
Did that sort of knock your confidence at all or anything?
Terrible. It was a terrible, terrible time. And I have my theories about it, but I'm not at liberty really to talk about it on the podcast, or actually generally I try and not make those public, but it did change things. I was meant to work the next day, and I was taken. I came back here because I stood up. And I looked, and I picked up the top hat, and I looked down, and I saw the red dripping down into the top hat. And I didn't realise what had happened. And I knocked on the door because Genya, my partner, who was here at the time then, answered the door to see me with this. My head had been gashed completely open, and it required a plastic surgeon. And she rang. She was very calm, and she rang the police. The police came, but apparently all the ambulances were busy. So they had to send a minicab.
It's weird.
Yeah. So the police said, well, all our ambulances are busy, so we'll send a minicab. So eventually, when the police got here, they realised it was more serious than they thought.
Right.
I went to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in the minicab, and they dropped me off, and then they said, it's going to be a while before you can be seen, you have to go into A&E. And these two policemen sat there. And then I think one of them said to Genya, where have I seen him before? And she thought, well, I'll throw out the television card and see what happens. Because apparently people, quite superficially, apparently celebrities get better treatment than normal people. So anyway, she said, well, yeah, he's been on TV. And he said, yeah, I thought I recognised him. And the policeman went round the corner, had a word with somebody or other, and I was immediately fast-tracked in.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, immediately fast-tracked in, and they got a guy in. There were no plastic surgeons on duty that night. They got a plastic surgeon in, Persian guy, because it couldn't be done by a normal doctor. It was done by a plastic surgeon who had to put numerous stitches in it because it was all opened up.
What did he hit you with in the head?
Piece of metal. I don't know what it was, but it was a piece of metal. It could have been a knuckle duster. I don't know what it was, but it was a nasty. Can't see it now. It's a lot better than it was, but it was a mess. It was all flat down there, and then I had a bandage around my head, and I had all these Christmas gigs to do.
Right.
So,
mind you, they're awful anyway, aren't they? So.
Yeah, they are awful. And you know what? I got the opportunity to play a bad Santa, which was good.
There you go.
So there you go. That was how I did. But it was very bizarre.
Obviously, in this business, there's times of rejection and times of difficult times with work. Maybe there's lots of work. Sometimes maybe there isn't a lot of work. Do you deal with that well or badly? Have you got any advice for magicians about how to deal with sort of darker periods.
Go on holiday in January. Go away. Because the way that things are in your business is that when you're working, everyone else is playing, and when you're playing, everyone else is working. So go to Blackpool in February. Go to Los Angeles in January. Go to the Caribbean in March if you can, and then be ready for work in April and May. Because you're going to get depressed twiddling your thumbs in January. There's no question about it. If you're purely doing those kind of close-up jobs, Talking of rejection, yes. I mean, I've experienced enough rejection over the years. I mean, down in the Hanging Tree Marble Arch, I had my fair share of rejection, and that's okay. Rejection is part of life, and the same with TV. I mean, when they did the Magicians, that program that had Lenny Henry on it.
Yes.
I had numerous meetings with a guy who was a co-godfather. We had co-godfathers to the same children, and I went in there. We had meeting after meeting together, and then I never heard from him. After about 4 or 5 meetings and sharing ideas with him, and being a co-godfather of the same children with him. And then nothing, boom. And then the show's being made with other people. Well, that's okay. It was never my show in the first place. If you've not got the gig until you've got the gig. So don't take it as rejection. It was never yours in the first place.
What about periods of time, Max, where you're not working or there's nothing really going on? I think a lot of magicians who I've spoken to on this have kind of struggled with sort of how to fill the time. I think sometimes people can get into bad habits, things like you've talked about, you stay fit, things like that. But are there anything in your life that you feel kind of over the years have kind of been a bad part of your life that you've had to get rid of at all? Or
there have been people in my life that were destructive. You have to watch out. You have to be careful. You have to have wise counsel. Be careful the people that you surround yourself with. There'll be people that you'll surround yourself with. There are plenty of people that will blow smoke up your arse. You have to watch out for those kind of people, because they won't necessarily. They might get a lot of yes people around you, but that won't necessarily mean that you'll grow and develop as a person. But you need people in your life that will be honest with you and realistic with you. And as my very good colleague, who I again love dearly, Robert Pound, who I've worked with for many years on shows, says there's nothing more detrimental to magic than false praise. I believe that. But I would also add to that, there's nothing more detrimental to magic than not enough encouragement. So you need the two.
It is both, isn't it? Yeah. So what do you think is the biggest problem with magic today, and how can it be fixed?
I think the biggest problem with magic is the ego of the magician. And I think the problem with it is that can trip up a magician in so many ways, thinking that his chops are what it's all about, or it's all about great moves and great skill. That's lovely. That's marvellous. One of my favourite entertainers is Faye Prester. She openly says, look, I do one pass, one of this and one of that. But she's one of the most entertaining people I know. And she's been working with you, hasn't she?
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. I think ego stops you from seeing something from the audience's perspective. You are a servant to your audience. You are there. They have come. They've had a hard day. They've been at work. You're there to bring a smile to their face, to make their life a happy place, perhaps for a moment, maybe for longer. Maybe you'll change someone's life. I mean, Nigel said it there in the book, magic has literally changed my life. Maybe you'll change someone's life. You don't know. But your focus, you've got to take your focus off you and think, well, at the end of the day, this is for the eyes and the ears of those who are watching and listening. And it's them. I want to bring about the maximum impact for them. I want to bring about the most enjoyable experience for them. And if you start there, thinking about them and thinking about what you have to offer them, as opposed to how they can make you feel validated as a human being, as someone that does tricks, If you get that the right way round, then I think you'll have every success. But if you get that the wrong way round, then people will smell it on you, and it doesn't smell very nice.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me into your home and letting me meet Milo the rabbit.
You're welcome. He's been very naughty, chewing through all the cables. He's a rascal, and he's not even a he.
Thanks very much, Max.
You're welcome.
It's always fun meeting an eccentric character, isn't it? That was Max Somerset. Thank you very much for doing the interview, Max. It was great to meet you, and thanks for inviting me into your home with my microphone. That's it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Go and take a moment, look up Max on YouTube, visit his website. He's done some amazing things. There is a lot to learn from him. We will, of course, be back again next Friday with another brand new episode of the Magicians Podcast. I will see you then. Have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.
I was hot, I want it all.